Thank you, Governor Hunt, Judy. I'm honored and delighted to be in North Carolina to celebrate the fine work of New Schools in North Carolina, the Hunt Institute, the Department of Public Instruction and the board, and the principals, teachers, students, and their families, business and civic leadership that have been working together and are continuing to work together for all you've been doing to make North Carolina a shining star and model state for the 21st century public education in this country. Judy certainly set a high bar for this, and as everyone talked about them being from North Carolina, I'm obviously not from North Carolina, but I couldn't help thinking, as she was talking about me being a thought leader, that my mother, who did not graduate from high school, could never understand what I did, but after I was out of school. But certainly being called a thought leader and getting paid for that would be something that I think would be way beyond comprehension. But I'm really delighted to very much to be here. We're living in a particularly challenging time for the United States and for our young people. And we need a shared, powerful vision of education for the 21st century. America faces the critical challenge of transforming rather than improving our educational system because of structural changes in the economy, globalization, technology, that are really changing the world in the way that the world was changed by the Industrial Revolution. And so we are living in a very, very challenging time. And the futures of our young people are far more tied to their educational capacities than ever before in our history. Much of the world is going fast and far, and we have to be doing that as well. And we can't, as everyone so far has said, be arguing about the barriers, whether or not we can have high expectations for everyone, or whether we, or whether poverty is the barrier, then we have to fix first, or what's the dynamic between them. We have to figure out how to make our goals attainable and take action for it. Our vision has to include the what, who, and how of education. This schematic here is a picture that we tried to put forward about both STEM education and educational attainment in general in the United States. The red part represents those students in our country who are not fully prepared to enter college, those students in K-12. It is, of course, discouraging how large it is. It represents those students who, a portion of students who have not graduated from high school, still about 30% in the country by age 18, in 4 years. We do a little bit better with some GEDs and other things. But it also represents the 40% of high school graduates who need remediation when they attend college in either mathematics or literacy. The yellow represents those who are ready for college, and the little green cylinder on the left represents those who have taken sufficient courses in high school to be able to do a STEM major at the college level. We developed this for the Math and Science Commission that Judy described because the commission members were very eager to understand what we needed to do to be able to generate far more capable STEM professionals in the country. Those who would we have a very low proportion of our students graduating in the bachelor's degrees compared to other countries and developed countries in the sciences and mathematics. And the argument that we really came to as a commission, which had many eminent scientists and economists and others on it, was that we couldn't grow that advanced STEM without growing the yellow. That is, this has to be something that starts in the early grades, goes through secondary education, and builds toward a STEM-capable population from which you would get advanced STEM, right? The other reason for moving to this as a goal is that most of the jobs that economists are telling us are being created and will be being created in the United States, and it has already begun, not only require greater levels of post-secondary education, but in fact require this kinds of knowledge and skills that is built through STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And that rather than thinking about STEM or science and math as only leading to traditional STEM careers. In fact, I think as anyone who is in the corporate world and hiring and looking at this now would say, more and more jobs, anything that is having higher earnings is looking for those kinds of skills across the board. In fact, many people think that part of our shortage in STEM professionals is that those with those capacities right now, in the yellow and the green, are being diffused across a whole range of other parts of the economy. So let me say what those skills are for a minute, because I think we had them illustrated by our two students this morning. We used to think, and many people thought about school and knowledge together. In school, you gain more knowledge, and that's still true. Knowledge is important. You can't just think, you have to think about something, right? So we do have to think about knowledge. But we need all of our students. We need our schools to do something for all of our students that has never been done before for all students. Students, young people today, need the ability to have new ways of knowing. They need to develop skills to inquire and understand, quantitative skills to be able to use data and evidence to make decisions, to problem solve. We need our young people to be able to think logically, to think critically and creatively, come up with new solutions, and to communicate well orally, Louise, as you've learned, and in writing. They need to be able to use technology, and they need to be able to work collaboratively. And most important and very challenging is they need to be able to integrate their knowledge and apply knowledge and skills in new unfamiliar situations. These kinds of competencies will be the currency of upward mobility in the new economy, as attested to in the needs of the developing economies here in Raleigh-Durham and Wake in the past few years. Another challenge when you're talking about school and education is that in addition, or not in addition, in building competencies, we tend to think about what competencies young people need, but as with all human beings, but particularly as you think of the developmental cycle of children and youth, building competencies is completely interactive with forming an identity. And we are in a contest for the identities of our young people today. Right? These are interactive. The more you build competencies, the more that you form an academic identity, the more that you are disengaged from school, bored, disconnected, not making progress, the more there's a contest for your identity from other parts of our society, which are either negative influences or influences that are going to lead to inactivity and an unproductive adult life. Why am I talking about this? First of all, you have an enormous amount of assets in this room that have been oriented towards school reform. Question today is, how do we take that and mobilize it in a way that actually leads this kind of transformative activity? And it has to happen at both very macro levels and also at this level of deep understanding of how young people learn and develop. You learn and develop, as all psychologists have told us, from what you do, who you do it with, and how you make meaning of it. Where does that lead me? I want to talk about both math and science and also about school and school design and the design of systems of good schools. The challenge we have are to create in a statewide effort, or in a citywide effort. When I was leading one where we had, 1,100,000 kids, 1,500 schools, is scale, and that's what Bob was talking about, is to create not only good schools, of which that's a pretty big challenge to begin with, and you've been meeting it with the 100 schools you've been creating across the state, but it's to create systems of good, effective schools. Many schools we have today are good, but far too many young people are in schools where they're not being challenged, where they're not progressing, and where they're not engaging. They're not putting themselves in the effort because they have not found that link between challenge, material, and relationship that is engaging them in a serious way. We know a lot about the design principles of effective schools, and in some of the material that's coming out today, there's a variation on them: powerful teaching and learning, personalization, individualized learning, support for teachers and administrators, college-going culture, college credit acquisition, work readiness, deep ties with higher education, business, and industry. We've used variations on them in much of the work that I've seen and much of the work that I did in New York. But I think what I would want to emphasize today is that they are the principles that you need to see in assessing every school in North Carolina. How far is each one of the schools from this design that we know is effective, so that we both celebrate the progress that's being made, but also have a good picture of what has to happen next, and then start thinking of the levers of change. So real quickly, let me go to the levers of change picture. So if what we want is a nice wide pathway for the students in North Carolina or any state to move through to opportunity, to being able to graduate from high school, go to post-secondary education, and have good STEM, the kinds of competencies and skills that we're talking about through mathematics and science. We want that pathway to be wide. Right now, for too many students, the pathway is narrow and they keep falling off, those numbers that you saw in the red and the yellow. Okay? What's wrong with our school systems in our country that we're not getting this pathway? We have weaknesses in each of the three areas: the who, what, and how of schooling. Standards and assessments, the what. What are we taught? Teaching and human capital, teaching school leadership, and school and system design. But as important as the fact that there are weaknesses in each of those areas, as well as great strengths in them, is that they're misaligned. That Common Core standards, as Judy was talking about, are absolutely critical, but they have to be taught. To reach those standards, we can't merely adopt them, right? This is a huge, huge challenge, not only for North Carolina, but everywhere. Our teachers in this country have not been prepared to teach the new Common Core. The Common Core in mathematics is far more challenging. It's far more challenging at the elementary level, all the way through middle and high school. And we have to face that this is a huge challenge and that we don't have the people on any level of scale who are prepared to do that. But the challenge that I would give to everyone here is that we need innovative solutions for how we're going to prepare and support our teaching force. It's not going to happen in a traditional way of just giving some training. This is a huge gap. And the statistic you gave, Judy, of 61% of students needing remediation in college means that I have to think about this as not some kids need to catch up. This is a transformational challenge that has to happen. The second, so that then leads to the who as well. And I know a number of organizations have joined with Carnegie, or we joined with you, in the 100K in 10 initiative for teachers, which is 100,000 new STEM teachers in 10 years. The idea is increase the supply, retain excellence, and build a movement. We can't do this. We can't just meet and make it happen, right? This has to be a new mobilization for these to happen. Thirdly, the how, and this is, I think, the place where you get into the greatest challenge. And I think that having our two students here this morning and then the follow-up conversations, everyone said essentially, we have to adopt a principle, which in my terms, when I was in New York City, we called children first. The idea of children first was that everybody making a decision had to keep putting that in front of them, right? Are we doing this in our own adult interests, or are we doing this in the interests of what is needed? This is like preaching to the choir by saying this here, but I say it so that we think about and make intentional and concrete always, what does it mean to put children first when you think about STEM education? Well, it means that everybody has to get access to engaging, intriguing, wonderful opportunities to learn science and math and to connect in other ways. It means that we have to get out of positional roles, right, and start trying to solve problems. And I think Governor Hunt was talking about the legislature doing that yesterday and thinking about in what ways to do that. For us, it required, it's very different in New York, but like lots of negotiation that basically said we have to change our schools, we have to close some schools, we have to create some schools. But from the business point of view, I just want to point out that one of the design principles that I mentioned, but I think of as having to be developed in a more robust way, is the notion of making schools have access to and be infused with the assets of the whole community. I don't think we could get from here to there, where we're trying to get to, without increasing the social capital that's available to the education sector and innovating in that way. And I think of it as making schools more porous, that the boundaries have opened up for young people, for teachers. And the challenge there, the challenge I would give to both the public sector and the business sector here, is how to make that with some kind of reciprocal accountability, so that we're not just sending doses of interesting work or the real world into school, but we're figuring out long-term, part-time partnerships that have some accountability at the end of them. STEM is the perfect place to start. It is a way in which we're seeing these examples around the country, design studios for new ways of teaching in project-based learning between industry and schools, the healthcare industry, pathways that open up to students, but also using the knowledge and skills of STEM, engineering, for example, to actually redesign the systems in some way. So finally, let me leave you with saying how much we've learned from what you've done in North Carolina, talk about in other parts of the country, obviously for many, many years under the great leadership of Governor Hunt, all the way through to this level of innovation. I think the lessons, the moment in time is one, though, that requires taking a deep breath and essentially saying, this has to be transformative. It is as big a change as the Industrial Revolution, and we need collaborative leadership that's going to be bold, that is going to put children first, and it's going to innovate to find ways to educate our children and youth to higher levels than they have ever been before. It's a delight to be here. It's an honor to be here, and I look forward to the day. Thank you.